You know what nobody's talking about right now? The Blue Jays have a massive problem on their hands, and it's not what you think. While everyone's obsessing over pitching additions and free agent signings, there's a player sitting on this roster right now who's about to force Ross Atkins into one of the toughest decisions he's made all offseason. And honestly, this could completely reshape how this team looks come opening day. So I came across this article recently breaking down 6 Blue Jays who won't be back in 2026. It mentioned the usual suspects, free agents, guys on expiring deals, but it got me thinking about someone who isn't getting nearly enough attention in these conversations. Davis Schneider. Yeah, that Davis Schneider. And before you click away thinking this is just another depth piece discussion, hear me out, because his situation is way more complicated than people realize. Here's the thing that's driving me crazy. Where exactly does Davis Schneider play on this team? Like, seriously, look at the roster construction right now. According to projections, you've got Anthony Santander penciled in to start most games in left field. Nathan Lukes is in the mix. Then you've got Schneider projected for maybe 21% of games in left, another 20% at second base. That's not a defined role. That's a guy without a home. The Blue Jays are in this weird spot where they've accumulated so much outfield depth that someone's getting squeezed out. It's not just Schneider either. You've got Joey Loperfido coming up through the system. You've got Miles Straw still on the roster with a guaranteed spot. There's Cam Eden or Elvis Martinez can play the outfield if needed. Even looking at lower levels, there's talent stacking up. At some point, you can't keep everyone happy, and that's where this gets interesting. I saw some really compelling analysis from Chris Black on Twitter about why Schneider could actually have a breakout year in 2026, and it's worth considering. He dives into Schneider's repeatable skills and how the new ABS challenge system could be a game changer for him specifically. Think about it. Schneider had one of the best eyes in AAA. His whole approach is built around working counts and drawing walks. If he can challenge questionable calls and force umps to get it right, that plays perfectly into his strengths. Remember how last year started for him? April was rough, absolutely brutal. But then something clicked. He started figuring things out. The bat came alive. And by the end of the season, he was posting close to an 800 OPS. That's not nothing. That's a legitimate major league hitter finding his groove. But here's the problem. Even if he does all that, even if he takes that next step, where does he play? Let's walk through the left field situation because it's honestly getting absurd. You've got Schneider, Straw, Loperfido, even Addison Barger in the mix. Then you look at guys like Rainer Nunez who hit for an 879 OPS last year. These aren't just warm bodies. These are players who deserve opportunities, who need at-bats to develop or maintain their value. The logjam is real, and it's only getting worse. The same goes for second base. Sure, Schneider could be the backup there, play matchups against lefties. But wait, Ernie Clement also crushes lefties, and you're probably not playing Schneider much against righties anyway. So where does that leave him? Battling for spot starts and pinch hit appearances. For a guy who just showed he can be productive when given consistent playing time, that's not ideal. This is why I think the Blue Jays have an impossible decision coming. Do they keep Schneider and accept that someone talented is going to be underutilized? Do they package him in a trade while his value is still solid? Maybe get a reliever or another piece they need? Or do they commit to him as a super utility guy and hope he stays sharp with irregular playing time? Nathan Lukes throws another wrench into this whole thing. He's established himself as a very good major league hitter. Probably not an everyday starter, but definitely someone who deserves regular at-bats. He bats left, Santander switch hits, Schneider bats right. On paper, that's a nice platoon situation, but you can't platoon 3 guys in one position. Someone's sitting, and when you're sitting multiple days in a row, that's when frustration starts creeping in. People keep calling this depth, and yeah, technically it is. Depth is great until it becomes a problem. And it becomes a problem when you've got 5 guys who could legitimately start in left field fighting for 3 spots in the rotation. It becomes a problem when talented players start looking around thinking they could get more opportunity elsewhere. These guys have careers to think about, future contracts to earn. Davis Schneider isn't going to be content riding the pine if he thinks he can start somewhere else. What's wild to me is how little attention this is getting. Everyone's focused on whether the Jays add another starting pitcher, whether they bring back Chris Bassett, all that stuff. But nobody's talking about the very real possibility that they might need to move one of these outfielders just to clear space and get value back. And it might need to happen soon. The other angle here is George Springer's health. If Springer's good to go and playing like the player we know he can be, that's one more body in the outfield mix. Suddenly you're looking at Springer, Santander, and then a rotating cast of Lukes, Schneider, Loperfido, Straw. How do you keep everyone engaged? How do you manage egos and expectations when at-bats are scarce? I think what makes this even trickier is that there isn't an obvious wrong answer. If they trade Schneider and he breaks out somewhere else, that's going to sting. If they keep him and he withers on the bench because he's not getting consistent reps, that's a waste of talent. If they trade the wrong guy and keep someone who regresses, that hurts the depth they worked so hard to build. There's also the consideration of what they could get back. If you're packaging Schneider or Loperfido in a deal, what are you targeting? Bullpen help makes sense. They could always use more reliable arms. Maybe a utility infielder if they're moving Schneider. But you're also trading from a position of need even if it doesn't look like it on the surface. You need these guys in case of injuries, in case someone underperforms. One scenario I've been thinking about is whether they could shift Jose Berrios to the bullpen and bring someone like Yariel Rodriguez into the rotation. That's been floating around as a possibility. If that happens, maybe it opens up roster flexibility elsewhere. Maybe they feel more comfortable moving an outfielder knowing they've got pitching depth covered. It's all connected. The Zips projections have the Blue Jays tied with Boston for the division, which is interesting. 72% chance to make the playoffs. That's built on the assumption that all this depth actually translates into production. But depth only works if you're using it correctly. If guys are sitting around getting rusty, those projections start looking shaky real quick. So here's what I think happens. Spring training is going to tell us a lot. Whoever struggles out of the gate between Schneider, Loperfido, and Lukes might find themselves on the outside looking in, or maybe they surprise everyone and Ross Atkins decides to carry an extra outfielder, sacrifice a bullpen spot to keep the flexibility. It's not conventional, but this team isn't really built conventionally. What would I do if I were running things? Honestly, I'd probably give Schneider the first crack at proving he's taken that next step. Commit to him as the primary backup second baseman and fourth outfielder. Give him enough at-bats to stay sharp, but not so many that you're forcing him into the lineup. If he produces, great, you've got a valuable trade chip at the deadline. If he struggles, you've got other options ready to step up. But I also think they need to be honest with these guys about roles and expectations. Nobody likes uncertainty. Tell Schneider what his role is. Tell Loperfido what he needs to do to earn more time. Give everyone a clear path. That's how you keep the clubhouse from getting toxic when guys aren't playing as much as they want. The reality is that good teams have these problems. Bad teams are scrambling to find anyone who can play. The Blue Jays are trying to figure out which good player sits. That's a nice problem to have until it isn't. Until someone gets disgruntled. Until trade value drops because a guy's been sitting too long. Until an injury happens and you realize you traded the exact depth piece you needed. This decision is coming whether people are paying attention or not. Davis Schneider's future with this team is genuinely up in the air, and how Ross Atkins handles it could define whether this roster construction experiment works or blows up in their faces. My gut says someone gets moved before the season starts because carrying this many outfielders just doesn't make practical sense. But we'll see. Spring training's going to be fascinating to watch, and I'll be paying close attention to who's getting reps where. This could get really interesting really fast.